Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar at Statistics Solutions. My name is Justin D'Souza. I'm a quantitative specialist and statistician here at the company. During today's webinar, we are going to look at some tips to fast-track the methodology chapter. I'll be focusing primarily on quantitative methods, but a lot of the advice will apply to qualitative and mixed methods as well. We'll send everyone a copy of the webinar and the PowerPoint at the end of the webinar. And if you have any questions, you can type them into the chat box or the Q&A box. We will have a designated Q&A session at the end. So if any questions come up, go ahead and type them into the chat box and I will address them at the end. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. First, I'll give an overview of the assistance that we provided our company for dissertation consulting. Then we'll look at some tips to fast track the methodology. So looking at things like committee communication, planning ahead, establishing timeframes, and looking at templates. And we'll also look at some methodology specifics, and I'll show an example of an approved methodology, and then we'll conclude with a summary. Right, on this slide, you can see the different parts of the dissertation that we assist with. Our company has methodologists, both quantitative and qualitative, and we have literature reviews. So we can assist with all the way at the beginning, topic development. If you need help framing a topic and a purpose statement and a problem statement, establishing research questions and a hypothesis, and then going into the prospectus or concept paper, depending on what school you go to. It may be called a prospectus or a concept paper. And the proposal chapters, intro, lit review, methodology. We assist with the IRB forms, data entry templates. We can host a survey for you on SurveyMonkey, and we can help you upload it onto Qualtrics or Amazon MTurk. We can also assist with the results chapter, both quantitative and qualitative. If you just send us your data, we can crunch the numbers for you and present it in an APA write-up. And then wrapping up the dissertation, we assist with the discussion, PowerPoints for both proposal and final defenses, and journal publications. So we can help you condense your dissertation into a journal submission. If you have any questions about the services, you can give us a call at 727-442-4290. All right, so first we'll look at planning. What are some introductory planning steps to make? First is establishing your goals and identifying the best times to communicate with your committee. So first off, if you're at the very beginning, you need to pinpoint your ultimate goals for the dissertation or thesis. Are you trying to make a significant breakthrough in your field, or are you just trying to get through the process as efficiently as possible? While it is noble to make a significant breakthrough in your field or your industry, the dissertation takes a long time. It's a time-consuming process. There are many variables that are outside of your control, such as committee reviews. Every committee is different. It's not always clear how many students each committee member is working with, so you have to keep that in mind. And data collection can also take many months, depending on how you're gathering data. It can take weeks to months. I've even seen it take up to a year sometimes. With that in mind, I would recommend saving the more rigorous industry field work for a journal publication after the fact, and try to get through the dissertation as quickly as possible. Pick a fairly easy topic. Don't use mixed methods, just pick one method, quantitative or qualitative, and we'll discuss that a little bit more. Then you want to establish timeframes in which you want to complete each section of your paper, whether that's every couple weeks, work on a different chapter, every month perhaps, finalize one chapter per month. If you don't have timeframes, you're going to let things slip. You may procrastinate a little bit more. So try to stick to timeframes. And then understand how your school functions in terms of committee reviews. Every committee is different. Every school is different. You need to know if you're going to submit individual chapters, one at a time for a review, or do you need to submit an entire proposal, for instance, like the intro, lit review, and methodology? Is that one submission altogether? Understand how many students your committee is working with. I mentioned that before. You need to organize submissions around their schedule. The next really important advice I would say is having a template for your chapters. Almost every school has a dissertation template or a checklist for what needs to go into each chapter and each section of the paper. So you can look for previously approved papers at your school. Most likely, there is a resource page on your website that will provide examples. Look for recent examples in the last few years, if that's possible. And even better than that would be having an approved example that your chair or your methodologist have been a committee on in the past. That way you know exactly the format that they're looking for. What are the section headings? What is the relevant information you need to put into each section? And once it's gone through your committee and you have committee approval, the paper often goes to a more formal review. At some universities, this is called the URR. I've seen it called the AQR. So you need to be prepared to review or communicate with this additional reviewer. And use screen share software. Okay, so Zoom, GoToMeeting, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, these are all very useful because you can record these meetings with your committee. You can go over all the feedback together. You can write notes. The most important thing is you can record the meetings. You don't have to take a million notes. And then you can go back. It also gives you a track record in case there's any contradictory feedback at some point. You know, your committee says one thing and then they change their mind several months down the road. If you have that recording, you can justify proceeding in a certain direction. Right, now we can look at some specifics within the methodology itself. If you're at the beginning of the process, just starting the methods or even at topic development, aim to have at least 3 variables of interest because this will allow you to draft 2 research questions. 2 research questions is kind of the bare minimum I see for a quantitative dissertation. And either test for relationships or test for differences. Those are the most common approaches. I did a webinar last week on developing research questions, and I went through different examples by research design. Check that out. I go into this in more detail. Okay, so you can test for relationships or test for differences. That's usually the goal. Then we go into the data collection plan. Think of this section like a recipe that someone else could replicate. If they just read your steps from step A to step Z, how would I collect data the same way this person did? So early on, pinpoint that if you're going to use a survey, a self-report survey, or if you're using archival data, try not to use both data collection approaches because it can be very challenging to merge quant and qualitative data. So self-report surveys involve identifying a sample and then asking those participants to complete the survey. Archival data, also called secondary data, this is data that has already been collected by previous research and it exists in a database. Avoid mixed methods if possible. I say that for many reasons. Reason one being that it's time consuming. You have to collect data for quantitative, then collect data for qualitative. You might have to do interviews, semi-structured interviews or a case study, and then you have to merge your quant and qual findings together. So it can take a considerable amount of time. So just pick quant or qual. Another reason not to do mixed methods is most committees will have one methodologist, and usually that methodologist is specialized in either quant or qual, not usually both. More on the data collection plan. Run a power analysis as soon as you can. Usually when the research questions are set in stone, you can run a power analysis, which is this software right here, G-Power. So this will tell you what is the minimum sample size I need to target based on the analysis I'm planning to use. So once that's run, identify if that sample size is even feasible to target. Is it too large? Is it maybe too small? If the sample size is too large, then it's possible you'll have to develop new research questions. So you can identify a smaller sample, or it will be a limitation of the research. If you don't reach the power analysis calculation, that's often a limitation you can discuss in your discussion. 5. All right. If you're using a self-report survey, definitely use something that's previously validated, that has been tested for validity and reliability. Creating your own questionnaire can add several months to the process because you might have to do a pilot study with a small sample, and you might have to give it to a panel of experts to evaluate the validity of it. It just takes a lot of time. So save that for a journal if you are developing your own tool. And within the methodology, there's usually an instrumentation section. So this is the type of information you need to provide: who developed the survey, give a citation for that and the year, what population was it originally tested on and validated for, how does that population align with your population, and then give the total number of survey items. What are the format of the questions? Are they Likert scale? Are they yes or no items? Are they objective questions, like there's a correct or incorrect response? Does the survey measure an overall scale or a factor, or are there subscales? What are the possible scores for the measures? Is it a 1 to 5 or a 1 to 7? I have to look for scoring instructions for the surveys, because it might say you need to reverse code certain items, or you need to take an average or a sum of the questions. What is the level of measurement of the variable? Is it continuous? Is it ordinal? Is it nominal? Then you need to give reliability and validity support. So you can look for Cronbach alpha for reliability. And you can also look at EFA or CFA results for construct validity. If you're using archival data, reliability and validity are a little more tricky, but the key information you need to look for is how can you trust that the archival data are accurate? And usually that information would be providing, justification that the spreadsheet has been checked for accuracy. Then you go into the data analysis plan. This is also a fairly big section in the methodology. So you first pinpoint what software are you planning to use: SPSS, SAS, Stata, R. We have our own company software here, Intellectus. You can check that out at the hyperlink here. So Intellectus will mirror results from every other software, SPSS, SAS, Stata, but it gives you an APA write-up automatically in minutes. It's very cool. You can check that out here. And then you go into how are you going to clean the data? How are you going to handle non-responses, people who miss certain questions on the survey? Are you going to remove them altogether? There are many ways to handle missing data. So I would check with your methodologist or your chair because they probably have a preference. Then using descriptive statistics to summarize your demographics and the variables of interest. So that can be things like frequencies and percentages for gender, ethnicity, education level. and then means and standard deviations for numeric factors. Then this is the big part. Uh, Within the data plan, you need to go research question by research question. What is the primary test you're going to use to address the hypothesis? So you go through, you would say, to address this research question, we are planning to use a linear regression. You need to give a definition of a regression. Why is it appropriate for your study? Pinpoint what the independent and dependent variables are. What assumptions need to be verified, normality, homogeneity of variance, things like that. If you go onto statistics layered right here and pinpoint what analysis you're going to be using, say we're doing a t-test. So just put statistics layered t-test into Google and click the first link here. So this website, I see a lot of universities are referencing this now, layered. So this website will teach you how to run the analysis in SPSS, but it also gives a breakdown of all the statistical assumptions you should check for that particular analysis. So you can use this as a reference or a guide for the assumption checking. Things like independence and outlier checks and normality. Okay, so once you check for assumptions, you go through the process for interpreting the findings. And there's that statistics layered breakdown and assumptions. So in summary, maintain consistent communication with your committee, check in every couple weeks at the most, I would say, check in weekly if you can. Have a time frame in which you want to complete every section of the paper. Keep in mind that your committee has multiple students. Some have 3 to 5 students. I've seen some committees have up to 20 students at a time, so it can be difficult. Aim for at least 3 variables of interest. Look for approved papers from your school that you could use to model your paper, keeping in mind that there's probably a template for your school and guidelines or checklists. Select either a survey approach or archival data. Try not to use both. And the same applies to the methodology. Select either quantitative or qualitative. Don't do mixed methods if you can avoid it. Run a power analysis as soon as you can so you can determine the feasibility of collecting your data, the sample size. And you could also consider using companies like SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics. You can hire these companies to target people for you and respond to your surveys. So they will charge per response, and you can give them a criteria, like I'm looking for teachers in the Northeast United States that have at least 3 years of experience. You can give these companies the criteria, and they will target people who meet that criteria. And they'll guarantee responses. A little expensive, but it is a good option. If you're using a self-report survey, identify the variables of interest. What are the scoring instructions for the tool? And give reliability, validity information. And then have a plan for analysis when you've developed your research questions. So I do have an example here of a methodology. We can quickly go through this just to highlight the key information. So this is an example from GCU. And so we start out with the introduction, pretty standard. The purpose statement is here verbatim from the earlier chapters. Then it goes into a restatement of the problem. So we have our problem statement, have the variables of interest mentioned here. Then it goes through the research questions and the hypotheses. Okay, so giving some background on what the variables of interest are, with some citations, mentioning the instrumentation and linking them to the appendix. Then we have the research questions and the hypotheses below them. Then GCU is really specific. That's why I'm showing this as an example, is I think it's a little too specific, to be honest, but they require key information that I think any methodology should have. So then it goes into the method. So this is pinpointing and justifying why did you select quantitative over qualitative, giving reasons why qualitative was not appropriate or why mixed methods was not appropriate. Then going into the specific design. So underneath quantitative, is it correlational? Is it predictive? Is it causal comparative? Giving a definition of why correlational is appropriate, giving reasons why other designs such as causal comparative or experimental were not appropriate. Then going into the population. Okay, so give a key or general definition of your population of interest. Giving criteria, who would qualify, who would not qualify. Here's the power analysis that was conducted. We need a minimum sample size target. This was done in G-power. Then going through the instrumentation. Okay, so this is why it's important not to have too many instruments. You don't want to have 5 different surveys because then you need to have a separate section per instrument. So 3 is kind of the most, I would say. Try to pick 3 previously validated instruments at the most. But within here, we have a citation of who developed it. We have how many items are in the instrument, with it being linked in the appendix. What is the format of each question? So it's a Likert scale from 1 to 5. What are the possible scores? How is it scored? It's scored by averaging or taking a mean of all the items. Then the next instrument is discussed, and you give the same details. Next instrument is discussed. And if you have a demographic questionnaire, then you'll need a section for that as well, for gender, ethnicity, education, age. Validity is another section you'll commonly see. So this is where you need to validate why you can trust using this survey. Okay, so you might have to give some previously calculated statistics for validity. Okay, so they talk about CFA and structural equation modeling findings here. They gave some statistics of those previous studies. Aim for the next instrument and the next instrument. Then reliability. So reliability and validity are 2 separate things. Might have to give reliability as well. And a common metric for that will be Cronbach alpha. Then this is another huge section, data collection and management. As I said, think of it like a recipe format. And some general things, first off, you need site approval for where you're going to be surveying. You need IRB approval from your school. Think about consent forms. You discuss how the recruitment is going to happen. Are they being directed to an online survey on SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics, or maybe you're doing the survey in person? Then the data analysis procedures. Okay, this is where you talk about data cleaning. Okay, so how are you preparing the data? What are you doing with missing responses? Descriptive statistics. Calculating reliability again for your sample potentially. And then going through the primary test that you're going to use. So in this case, it was a Pearson correlation. So this person actually great timing because they reference statistics layered, that website that I showed you just a few minutes ago. And these are the 5 assumptions that were verified for a correlation. So they go one assumption by one assumption, what needs to be verified. And then they go through the interpretation of the correlation itself right here. After that, that's the major final section. It then goes into ethical considerations, okay, and limitations of the research. That could be you anticipate the sample size going to be low potentially. Uh, that maybe there's no reward that's being given, so there's no enticement to gather participants. The limitations as well, those are specific methodological constraints for your study. So, for instance, using a convenience sample, and that's it. And then it goes into the summary. So this is more of a detailed, I've seen far less detailed methodologies, but I wanted to show you a highly detailed one because there's probably elements that you can take from GCU's template, even if you don't go there. All right, so I do see we have, excuse me, we have some questions. Let me pull those up. Okay, question from Blanca. This was a little bit earlier on in the presentation. You said, was that a website, the one that you clicked on, or a different one? No, the website for Statistics Layered was not on the presentation, but I'll put it in the chat box right now. All I did was I typed a specific analysis into Google and put Statistics Layered. Okay, so let me put that in the chat box here just in case. Okay, another question from Blanca. I know you recommended to only select one qualitative or one quantitative design, but what if the committee chair asks the student to do mixed methods? What does the student do then? Well, then I think there's not really much you can avoid to do it. If your chair's set on doing mixed methods, you'll probably have to do mixed methods. But you could try to make the argument that the data works better for quantitative versus qualitative or qualitative versus quantitative. You could recommend future studies do both designs, or if you do quantitative, you could say future studies could look at this qualitatively. I would try to fight it if you can. But if your chair has made up their mind, then you might just have to do mixed methods. The example was someone that we worked with, so I can't provide that example. Is there a min or max when considering our convenience samples also in qualitative? So for qualitative, I can't give too much advice on sample sizes. I'm not an expert in qualitative, but in general, I see between 5 and 10 is usually the number to shoot for qualitative, and being better. Okay, we have a question from Jean. Would you advise against using oral, historical, and survey or interview and ethnographic methods? I think I need more information. I'm not entirely sure what oral historical survey means. I'm not too sure what ethnographic methods means either. It sounds more qualitative to me. I'm not sure if ethnography, would that be the word? If that falls more into qualitative. Yeah, I think that would fall more into the qualitative. I can't give too much advice on qualitative methods, unfortunately. We do have webinars that are specific to quality, but I wouldn't advise against, I wouldn't advise for. I don't have enough information, unfortunately. Do we have any other questions? Good. If you, as we're waiting for more questions, if you would like to contact us, you can give us a call at 877-437-8622, or you can email Janine for a free consultation. Any final questions for the methodology? And we'll send everyone a copy of the PowerPoint and the webinar, most likely tomorrow, that will be sent out. I don't think that dissertation has been published yet, Blanca, but if you just type in into Google GCU previously approved examples, something like that, I'm sure something will come up. Question from Jihan. Can you use questions from a qualitative study in a quant and it still be valid? It depends what the format of the qualitative questions were. Um, Potentially, if you can find a way to numerically measure a qualitative concept, then that would work. It depends on the format of the question. And yes, Blanca, GCU dissertation sample, something like that. Okay. Do we have any other questions? All right, thanks for joining, everyone. Come join us for future webinars and let us know if you have any questions. Have a great day. Take care.